So on that note, what I would like to do is move over to the chairs here and begin a little bit of a conversation for everyone's benefit with Andy Kaplan. Andy Kaplan is the former president of Sony Global Networks, and he also recently was kind enough to come on board as the non-executive chairman of QMedia India, and is helping us with his expertise and knowledge grow our business there. And so with that, Andy, come on up and we'll get started.
You did it on time. You stuck to it.
There we go. Let me get my questions out here. So, many of you probably don't know who Rich Greenfield is. He's a somewhat either admired or despised person in the U.S. who does a lot of media reporting, and he's quite widely acknowledged as one of the experts in the media space. And Andy, he recently said, we are seeing the greatest rearranging of the global media chessboard in history. Do you have any thoughts on Rich's statement in that regard?
Well, first, let me start by saying that, and I sort of figured this out a little bit too late, but the heading of this conversation is a little bit daunting. Content distribution, the next 5 years. I mean, there was a time a decade ago or 2 decades ago where I would have with a certain level of confidence, I think, the ability to think out 3 to 5 years about where the media industry is going, what the trends are going to be, and so forth. We're living in an age now that if this was a 12-month conversation, I'd probably have half confidence that I could probably get it right. So from a context standpoint, we'll do the best we can in terms of trying to think about the issues and so forth, but 5 years is too far for me to kind of think about. Rich Greenfield, as he said, is a really smart, one of the better industry analysts, and he's also very provocative, and he's also known for sort of asking tough questions, or the questions that most media analysts don't have the guts to ask. But the framing of the question, I don't know exactly what the context was. I'm not.
He was actually talking about Netflix at that.
He's talking about Netflix. I'm not sure it's a chess game. I think maybe it's more like Risk or Capture the Flag or whatever war game kind of metaphor you want to use. But I sort of focus in particular on the word global in the question, because the global chess game, in my mind, is really about the FANG technology stocks as opposed to the media companies, the studios, the content suppliers and distributors. And the reason I say that is those are the only companies, whether it's Netflix or Amazon or Google, YouTube, or so forth, they're the only ones who truly have if they want it, instantaneous global distribution, that they can flip a switch and distribute a piece of content around the world to every country and so forth, as opposed to all of the media companies who all are global companies and operate globally, but they really operate in 200 different countries at a time on an individual basis. And up until, I guess, what we're about to see happen with the direct-to-consumer rollouts, as we've heard about in the AT&T Warner Media app, or the Disney Fox OTT app, or presumably maybe a Comcast NBC Universal app, which at some point will probably have the same sort of global and instantaneous reach. Everybody else is sort of still operating in a lot of ways one country at a time. So the chess game is, I'm not necessarily convinced that everybody's sitting around thinking about what their opponent on the other side is doing, as opposed to just trying to figure out what their own strategy is to reach a global audience as effectively and instantaneously as they can. And that may be a 5-year conversation.
So I spoke a little bit about the debate that rages over SVOD, AVOD, and what's going to become kind of the dominant if there is one that's going to become dominant platform style going forward. YouTube, I guess it was last week, or maybe the week before, but very recently announced that what was originally called YouTube Red and then changed to YouTube Premium, that they were disbanded, which became a sort of a low-priced SVOD service, that they were going to stop doing that and they were going to turn it back completely into an AVOD service. Do you think that has any indication of where things are headed, or is there any significance that you derive from the fact that they changed their model, a company of that scale and size?
I think it's really significant, and I'm not sure it's as much about changing the model as, in a way, retrenching from a big original content initiative that I guess they realized over the course of a couple of years just wasn't working. And it's not like Google and YouTube couldn't afford to stay in that business. They just clearly realized, at least for them and their business, that it wasn't the right use of capital in terms of their ability to monetize effectively. But what I think is significant is we've heard a lot of conversation about how much content is being produced. Too much content, maybe, and we've heard statistics about 450 or 500 original series at a time, and so forth. And the reason it got to that point and those numbers were so big is because everybody was getting into the original content production business. And now YouTube's pulling back from that. And so is that sort of the start of what we're going to see a lot of other people retrenching? It's very expensive to create original content on a competitive platform basis that everybody's in right now. And maybe it's too expensive and maybe there's better uses of capital. And so I wonder if what that retrenchment of YouTube is an indication of is a peaking of the amount of content, that original content that is being produced, on a running rate basis, and maybe we'll see it sliding back, not from 500 to 200, but maybe it's a peak.
And going back to the traditional side, I talked a little bit about how we've taken a position of trying to bridge the gap between traditional linear television and where sort of the digital world has evolved around short-form video content specifically for us. You spent almost 2 decades building the Sony linear channel business in India, among other places around the world. How do you see the landscape for the linear channel business today and over the next, call it 3 to 5 years, in terms of what's going to transition out? Not to lead you with the answer at all, but I'm just curious. I mean, you see even in India and the US right now, there are a lot of classic carriage disputes that are taking place with MVPDs that are dropping channels. So how do you see the Sony linear business growing or changing?
Well, I'm not going to address the Sony linear business. I'll just, sort of speak to, I guess, observations about linear channels. I mean, they're not going away, and they're not going to go away in the next 5 years. Some will go away, but the linear channel business is not going away. And in fact, in some parts of the world, you kind of have to, again, answer the question on a country-by-country basis based on whatever the particular ecosystem is there. And there are still many countries around the world and territories where the pay TV infrastructure is still actually growing, and there's still subscribers that are being added and so forth. But I think it's a value for money kind of conversation. I think a lot of the linear channel businesses in a lot of parts of the world have all built up and grown up with big and expensive infrastructures that then need to get monetized through subscriber fees and advertising fees. And in most places we've sort of hit the wall. I mean, the operators have hit the wall in terms of their ability to grow subs and raise prices, and many or most of them are public companies which are under the pressure of profitability growth metrics and all those sorts of things, and so they're forced into finding ways to continue to grow profits. And the revenue lines have many revenue line situations have all kind of capped out and are going the other way. So how do you grow profits? You cut costs. And so the strong linear channels are going to survive, though I question whether they'll continue to be able to raise their revenues, and the weaker ones are gonna fall away, because I think what has been found time and time again is that the people who subscribe to the pay TV ecosystem are willing to pay a certain amount for a certain number of channels and value and so forth. But I think everybody's kind of maxing out on that, and we've seen so many cases where channels are dropped and it doesn't affect subscriber switch-offs and turn-offs. And so it's a little bit of a war of attrition, but it's a little bit of value for money. So I think, like many other parts of the business, the strong ones will survive, the weak ones won't.
And do you think that the strong ones will be able to compete with the Netflix and Amazons of the world in terms of creating the ultra premium content or the premium content that attracts viewership to those channels?
Well, I think the strong ones all have to be in the original content business. And so depending on, what genre they happen to be, if they're a genre channel as opposed to a broad-based channel, they'll have to compete in those particular areas. It's all getting more expensive. There's no question about it. And the more money that the Netflixes and the Amazons and the big players spend on content, both to produce it but also to take competition off the market, just causes upward pressure on content costs. And it's just going to cause margin pressure, I think, for everybody.
So, obviously, again, I spoke about our business and short-form content, etc. Most of the people in the audience probably or may have well heard about a company that Jeffrey Katzenberg financed recently by raising $1 billion. It was originally then called New TV and has now formally announced its name as Quibi, Q-U-I-B-I. Quibi is focused only on the short-form content business, and what they talk about is ultimately rolling out an SVOD service that features a host of all sorts of different kinds of content, but driven by premium short-form content by the same people, the J.J. Abrams and Christopher Nolans and Steven Spielbergs, etc., that are doing ultra-premium television content, movie content, etc. Do you have any thoughts on the Quibi business and what you see happening around that over the ensuing years?
Well, I don't know anybody who's made a career out of betting against Jeffrey Katzenberg, and I'm certainly not going to be the first one. And I don't know what I don't know, and I know what I've read about and so forth. First of all, you have to hand it to him for his ability to raise money. I mean, it's been reported they raised $1 billion, and I know that pretty much all of the media companies invested with him. Not necessarily a lot of money, maybe even a little bit, but it was fascinating to sort of watch the industry fear of missing out factor. That nobody wanted, there wasn't a CEO in a media company that wanted to be the guy who had to explain to his boss why he didn't invest with Jeffrey Katzenberg. And so in that respect, you give him a lot of credit. What I don't necessarily understand is, when he says, we're gonna spend $100,000 a minute. I don't know necessarily why that's a relevant number. I mean, at the end of the day, they have to make good compelling content that people are going to want to not only watch but subscribe to. And I'm not sure I know the difference between a $100,000 a minute show and a $50,000 a minute show. I also am not exactly sure why that the people that are going to subscribe to this proposition, I don't know that they necessarily care that this show is produced by J.J. Abrams in your example, or Steven Spielberg or whatever. Now, if you told my 14-year-old daughter this app's going to have a show from J.J. Abrams starring Ariana Grande, she's going to say, I want to subscribe to that. So, in some ways, it's what's the real compelling piece of it. So there are pieces in the story that I don't necessarily understand, and I also don't necessarily know that what the world needs is one more SVOD service, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I think we're all finding ourselves subscribing to so many of these things, whether it's $2 a month or $10 a month or whatever it is, at some point, we're all going to sit down and look at our credit card or our telephone bill or whatever it is and add it all up and go, geez, I'm spending so much money on this because they're so easy to subscribe to. But on the other hand, the advent of the technology, the frictionlessness that comes about of subscribing and then unsubscribing makes the switching in and out of these things sort of so tumultuous that I think it's going to be really interesting for all of the S1 providers to kind of try to really track and figure out. I mean, I know there's one particular app that shows a lot of English drama programming that my wife really likes, and you can subscribe to it for a month because there's a particular show you want to watch, and then you can unsubscribe to it. And I think that's a tough, sustainable model, and I think the millennials that you were describing are going to be very much acculturated to that kind of dropping in and out sort of a thing. And so I think it becomes a really challenging, sort of predictable, long-term model. Having said that, Jeffrey's got $1 billion more than I do, so we probably bet on him.
And do you see a scenario under which a series based on 3 to 5 minute episodes produced by Steven Spielberg can have the same sort of appeal that a Game of Thrones or a Walking Dead or one of these other series has had in the traditional format of television?
I think they're different experiences. I don't know that they're comparable. I mean, if anybody could produce anything great, it's going to be Steven Spielberg. It's got to be the right creative approach and execution of a 3 to 5 minute episode, which is such a different experience than sitting down in front of the TV for an hour to watch Game of Thrones. I think it's a little bit apples and oranges. I think they can both be fantastic, compelling experiences. I just think they're very different.
Okay, so we've got I guess only one question from the audience here, because we've been so complete. Not sure if this is for me or you. It says, why wouldn't the kids want to watch ads? Ads are also content sometimes if created that way. Well, I guess I can take that. I think that the concept of branded entertainment has been around for quite a long time. And certainly in the US market or even in the global television market, the concept of Super Bowl ads has been around for a long, long time, and even there have been television shows created with, the world's greatest Super Bowl ads, or usually the day after the Super Bowl, those ads are all featured in some sort of curated format. So I think my opinion would be is that I would expect that would continue, and there have been, amazing ads that have been created. I was really referring to the concept of, obviously in the traditional world of television, it's been dominated by the 30-second ad. In some cases that's been reduced in time to 15 seconds or 10 seconds increasingly. And in the world of YouTube, for lack of a better comparison, the pre-roll, the 5 to 10 second, the 15 second, in some cases the 30-second pre-roll, mid-roll, post-roll has become the predominant form of advertising. In the digital world, as I had mentioned, the proliferation of ad blockers has become so dominant for this age group, and it's even more so as you look at it in mobile phones and mobile devices. It seems sort of untenable to rely on viewership of the traditional 30-second pre-roll, post-roll type ad, and the embedded advertising, which again is not a new concept, but is a concept that we believe increasingly will need to be utilized for brands and advertisers for no other reason than the content won't be watched otherwise. It'll simply be ignored, or never even seen, which is worse than even being ignored. And so we're big believers that that's going to happen. The other thing that I would comment on is most popular digital content creators don't really make their living out of the spots and the pre-rolls that are run against their video content. They make their living out of brands and advertisers paying them to make content. The wealthiest influencer marketers on the planet Earth is the Kardashian family. literally who make billions of dollars by doing what back in the old days we would have called product placement, by carrying around a phone or drinking a certain brand of water or whatever may be in the content that they create around what they're doing. So we're increasingly believing that that style of advertising is just going to become a necessity more than anything else. So, you have an opinion on that? More. Here we go. More questions. Okay, we'll try this one. I'll ask you this, Andy. Will the battle be won on the TV screen or the mobile screen?
Both. I mean, everywhere. I mean, the 360 aspect, the seamlessness of being able to move from one screen to the other, I think, generationally is just so habituated now. When my 14-year-old daughter, 1 minute she's on her computer, and the next she's on her phone, and she's on her iPad, and then she's on the TV, and I think they're all just vehicles for consuming content, and I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's absolutely all.
Okay, well with that, it looks like our time is up here. So thank you all very much. We appreciate it, and thank you so much, Andy.
Thank you, Kurt and Andy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the next session will commence immediately.